Readability audits. Now, this is something that came up that I worked on last year, and it really struck me as an interesting thing. So I know that audits, content audits, people are interested in them as a way of, how can we decide, what are some of the ways that we can decide to reduce content on websites? And one of those is you look at the analytics and you see what's not performing. What are people not going to? Or you ask your audience, or, you suddenly, this is my favorite part, you have a program stop. We're no longer selling this, we're no longer featuring this, all of that can come down. That's my favorite part of a content audit. But what actually happened is we had a tool. And what I'm going to do in a few moments is give you a live demo of how we got the results and then explain how I put it together. Now, as always with this is simply a tool that we already had. We didn't go out and buy it. We didn't go out and buy SiteImprove. We already had access. We had been using it for a couple of years to check links. Now, I don't know what tool your group uses to check links, but this is one that we had, and honestly, it took us a while to realize that it had other features because, people said, this is a link checker, and we said, excellent, we will use the link checker to check links because, that's an important part of websites as well. But somebody, who shall go nameless, was noodling around and said, hey, it also does this. And I thought, well, that is very interesting. So I'm going to move to the live demo right now, which is as exciting as this. This is, what happens when you log in. You can choose, and there's a little bit of work that has to go into this. You have to load the pages into SiteImprove. I don't think that happens automatically. But at any rate, we had, we wanted to start with a small sample. So all we had to do was go to that where we were already checking links and go to quality assurance. And then all we had to do was go to readability and then pages. I mean, I'll look at readability test results first just to see what happens. I'm not sure this tells us all that much. Oh, it gives us a very large idea of where the content is. Most of the content appears to be at the high school junior level, and this is based on Flesch Kincaid. There are some other ones. I wanted to also say that obviously if you don't have the tool, you're not prohibited. You just have a lot of more manual work. You could do this a different way. You could do it by hand, or you could do it in Word and, look at the level there. So if we went to pages, if we go to pages, this is what we were looking for. And this is a little exciting because the tab that I need has disappeared because of what's in the screen here. Let me see if I can hide that. Okay, so this gives a moderately good explanation of Flesch Kincaid. I should emphasize that, as it says itself, it uses long sentences, it measures sentence length, and it measures the number of polysyllabic words, that is multisyllable or many-syllable words. And those are certainly things that we look for in plain language. If you remember the techniques, we look for short sentences and short paragraphs, and we look for common everyday words, which are often, not always, shorter. But I'm going to start my disclaimer now. We're what, 7 minutes in? The readability is not going to guarantee plain language. So going back to the demo, I'm here at quality assurance, I'm at readability, I'm at pages, and I hit export. Now, this is what to me made the tool attractive, that a lot of the stuff that otherwise might have to be done by hand did not have to be done by hand, and that's a huge help. So we were looking at this and we ended up exporting to an Excel file and uploading into Google Analytics, which is where I'll pick up the demo again. And we might have questions about Site Improve later on, and I can go back to showing Site Improve if you like. So we got to this. Oh yeah, I'll have to go back to the accepted words at some point. Yeah. But I want to leave that discussion for a little later. So what we did at that point, having gone to Site Improve and gathered the data, we had a process. And, you know, as I've said before, GSA is a Google shop. And so we created a Google Drive folder that we could share with people. And we uploaded, we started with the smaller site, this smaller set, which is what I have open right now, which is, yeah, pages, not that many. Yeah, 24 items. That was the smallest set that we had. And I'll go back into presentation mode. What we did is we uploaded that spreadsheet that you saw, the Excel sheet, we uploaded that into Google Sheets. And then we looked at how are we going to decide what to do? And we looked at what we had and we said, let's see, let's pick 12. And, you know, 12 years of education is being, you know, enough for the very specific audience. What we had as an audience in information technology category, which is that group of GSA that sells IT, buys and sells IT to the rest of the federal government, we mostly have three audiences. We have people who are researching what to buy. We have contracting officers who are actually making the purchase. And we have vendors who want to see if they can sell through us. This is a gross simplification, but this is what drove a lot of our decisions. Since I also ended up finding a lot of the jobs for which ITC was hiring, all of them asked for a college degree. And so I thought, well, I don't want to go up to, you know, saying 16 years of education is good. Let's drop it down to 12. You know, that's what I thought. And it was sort of in the middle. You know, this was unscientific, but we had some reasoning behind it. You know, most of the people in these jobs are going to have at least a college degree. We divided things into red and yellow using the, you know, the iconography of stoplights, hoping that would work. The red zone, of course, is what we worked on the most. If I remember correctly, 12 through 14.9 was yellow. Anything above that was red. So that's how we divided that. We put each page, we copied and pasted each page into a separate Google Doc because a lot of these pages had different owners and managers. And so we used the suggestion edit rather than plain edits because I always like people to see exactly what I did unless it is too extensive. And then I just say, here's the new stuff, and they can correlate if they like. So we had all the track changes. We shared it with the SMEs or the page owners. We coordinated, you know, we started out saying, we did a readability audit. This page clocked in at 14.9. We, you know, are aiming for a score of 12. Now, I'm sure this is just me, but sometimes the content negotiations, the editing negotiations can take forever. We were amazed that once we shared it with the content owners and the SMEs, their approvals came within days. I mean, if there's no other reason to do a readability audit, getting a quick response was definitely one of them. And we were literally dumbfounded. I mean, it was just quite extraordinarily surprising. that that would be the case. So that was a great benefit. And most people, agreed, yeah, like everything. We got some pushback on a few pages, but mostly, it was okay. They said make all these changes. So we did that. We updated the page with the corrected text or the edited text, and then we reran the audit. And I'll be sharing this with you a little later on. So this is what we aimed at. This was the decisions that we made. And part of that was, and I had to crop it because this needed to be big enough to be seen. And some of the things I didn't think, you didn't necessarily need to see our notes, like when was this done, things like that. I mean, we had that, but what we were focused on was the page readability score. Sorry, a little unauthorized advancing. What this gave us was the page readability as calculated by the Flesch-Kincaid thing. The total words. And, we could see that some of these pages were really rather short and some were long. Um, we didn't take that so much into our factor, but it gave us the number of long sentences. So, we did know what to focus, what to look at, and the number of polysyllabic words. And we kept a quick record of some of the ones that we were thinking about either whitelisting, that is adding, excluding from the list. Incidentally, the word not whitelisting, but you can either accept or exclude it. And I thought that was an interesting phrase. I think most people, figure out what it means, but it seems that it has two contradictory meanings. So this is how we did it. Okay, I was right. 14.9 and between 12.1 and 15.0 was yellow, and then everything above it was red, and we worked on the red ones first. So that was, as we said, as we were thinking, it's really a good idea to do this on a small set, because we wanted to be able to complete a section and say, all right, if we move on to different divisions or different centers, we want to be able to finish everything in one piece before we move on, because otherwise you just have a lot of outliers and you have to track them down and chase them down, and that's a tiresome editorial responsibility to have to do. And we wanted to get all of it done by the fiscal year, so that was another driver for us. And again, this is not everything, but this is what I thought you would find the most important. Over here, which you can't see, is page title and then URL. And as I said, we didn't necessarily need this, but this is what we were focusing on. And this was also one of the really neat things that it provided. You could upload and say what are the differences, and we had our our Google Sheets, and we ended up with a very helpful guide. Now it shows that in most cases there wasn't a huge jump, but it was interesting to see what are some of the things that did presumably get further down to the acceptable level. And we've still got some outliers. There's still some that were like, maybe we can do this again and try and bring about, and again, this is no surprise. Some groups were more amenable to being edited than others. I said that once they saw the score, they were much more focused rather than my just saying, hey, I did a plain language on your page, plain language edit on your pages. For some reason, that does not give the same result. They're not, quite as receptive to that. Although, they all knew that I was on the team and able to do plain language edits, and they've asked me for plain language edits before. It just wasn't one of those sort of enterprise content projects that they were thinking about, because it hadn't been done to them before. So a couple of mistakes were made, and I'm using that deliberately, that passive voice construction. We went tool first. We didn't sit around thinking, we have a problem with our pages, because we would have said, oh, our pages are in plain language, because I've worked on them, I've looked at them. My team members were, alert to the problem of, the issue of putting things in plain language, and we thought, we're pretty good. And that was not the case. Once we found out what the tool offered, we realized, no, we are not quite where we want to be. And this is a useful realization to say, oh, interesting. Not quite what we expected. We also have, you heard me outline my reasons for picking grade level 12 years of education to understand this content. But there's no evidence or research based on that. That was just, this is kind of the mean, this is kind of the middle of where the content is, and we certainly know we want to bring it down. This is a useful discussion on what what reading level you should be aiming at. And there's no one grade level for the federal government. We can't say, oh, we're aiming for 6, 7, 8. We can't say we're aiming for 9, 10, because each of those, each agency, and sometimes within that agency, has different audiences. For example, if you're dealing primarily with a lot of people who are reading translated content and who may know English as a second language, but they may not read it fluently, those are two separate things, you have one set of considerations. If you remember our first summit, or at least one of our summits, one of our 2 summits, we had someone talking about adult literacy, Dr. Meredith Larson from the education department, and she talked about adult literacy rates with some considerations for what that meant for the government audience. GSA, since our audience is mostly the rest of the federal government, we have a slightly more consistent one. But, there's a difference between people buying IT and people buying office supplies. Maybe there's a difference. As I said, we didn't know. But we wanted to try this. And as I said, we didn't test this on actual users. That was going to be user testing was going to be our second project. And we would still like to do that. It's a question of how we find someone to do it. And so that was some of the weaknesses in the project. But one of the things we found, as I said, once we assigned a score to it, people were very responsive to the edits. And this was rather surprising. One of the things we found is that while most scores went down, they didn't necessarily go down quite as much as we needed them to. And sometimes one of them went up, which I thought was rather ironic, but the team working on that insisted upon quoting directly from the contract. So we couldn't do, and I understand that. There were some problems there because we didn't want to lead people astray. We never want to do that with plain language edits. On the other hand, we really wanted to make it easier, and we just got a lot of resistance there. So maybe we can try that later, or, my favorite, maybe that program will go away. Maybe we can do that. But, we got things down. Oh, except for that one. There's always a couple. But we were, interested in the process of how do we make that, and how do we focus on um, doing things in the future so we don't have these high readability levels, requiring a lot of effort from our audiences. And some of that was literally, it was making sentences shorter. Some of them were really, really easy when we looked at them. And we thought, oh, yep, I see why that scored so high. That sentence is 6 lines long. Let's bring that down. Let's break that into 2 sentences. Let's take out some of the prepositional phrases. Let's do that. And then, of course, some of it is, then we'll also substitute words. And I have something about that. What we did learn, it's best to start small for a pilot. Nothing too surprising here. We went from a project with 24 pages, that was the products and services, up to one that I think might have had about 100. And we broke that down again into smaller groups so we could finish a group before we moved on to the next one. As I said, subject matter experts, content managers respond very quickly once they have a score. And I don't understand that, because there was no one questioned how we got the score, which I was rather hoping, because we could say, well, these were our hypotheses, this is why we decided on 12, but no one ever even asked that. And as everyone knows, readability formulas do not guarantee plain language. So I had to explain that a little less than I had anticipated. I had thought that a lot of people would be saying, well, how did you get this score? And I would talk about readability formulas and the Gunning Fog Index and Flesch Kincaid, but apparently a lot of people had heard about that already. So, we may have to, the next time we do this, and we do have plans to do another division and another group, we will have to be a little bit, I think, more transparent about plain language. Maybe. As I said, I really liked having people get back to me with their approvals. I mean, it was so quick. I, was astonished by that. And I talked a little bit about whitelisting keywords, and this is some judgment calls that we made. Some of the ones we had to whitelist were things like information technology, although quite frankly, see what happens when yeah, okay. We were looking at the sorts of words that we thought people coming to these pages would know. Information technology, although we're starting to just move that to IT where we can. Cybersecurity, subcontracting, interagency operations, credentialing. We help with the PIV cards, the government badges, and there's, we were not sure, or we did not get words. Now, one of the things we would have liked to have been able to do, excuse me, one of the things we would have liked to have been able to do was to get a much more accurate showing of what words people use to search on the site. And we have not been able to really get that through the version of Google Analytics that we're using. So, we are still trying to get that. So we were distinguishing between the words our audience, people in our audience would know, or words that, long words, multisyllabic words that could be edited away. Like additional, we usually just said more. So there are some, as always, there are some easy edits, there are some obvious edits, and there are ones where you have to dig a little further. But this was an interesting exercise for us in trying to put a number on plain language content, or a number, a grade level on content, to try and say, this is where we are versus this is where we'd like to be. Now, I'm sure that there's a million questions that people have had in the very few slides that I've had. Alex or someone from the team, can you read out the questions and we'll see about answering?
We don't have any so far, Catherine.
What? What?
Yeah. But as a reminder to our
How could this
audience,
be?
please put some questions in the chat if you have any.
Well, while everyone's thinking about the questions, and they can be about site improve or general questions about readability formulas or the question of audience, I was reading an article by noted information design researcher Karen Shriver, and one of the things she talked about is people really don't like, people like what they're used to. So I think that is part of an issue of how people fall into language patterns or writing patterns they're used to seeing. And this is something that I've seen fairly recently and finally just got fed up with. Please do not hesitate to contact us if you have any questions. And the snark was pretty high that day. And I said, has anyone actually ever hesitated? Can we change that long phrase to contact us with any questions? You know, I don't think anyone's done a report on that, but the hesitating, you know, the hesitating just sounded like that's not actually an issue. Are people hesitating? Do we know? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jet Engine Repair is at it again.
We actually have gotten some questions.
Hooray!
Yay! How would you go about getting user-based evidence and user testing for future projects like this?
I'm not really sure. That's a wonderful question, and I think explains a lot of why we didn't do it in the first place. But I mean, we really were not sure where to go. Now, what I might do this go round is check with our customer service team, our customer experience team, and say, do you have any ideas about, you know, our audience's literacy levels specifically for this group of pages? Maybe, maybe not. CXO, the usability group in here, I'd also like to find out if we have any studies government-wide. I don't know if we do. I mean, that's the sort, the questions that we're asking, that I'm asking, seem to be ones that we're not actually allowed to ask, or there are lots of, and if I'm doing a disservice to government survey people who are responsible for government surveys, it's my ignorance. I'm not sure we can ask some of these questions. And we couldn't certainly do anything, at least I think we couldn't do a pop-up that we say, hi, I noticed that you were on our page about buying hardware. Did you go to college? I mean, I just can't figure out a way to word that well, you know, just to see about that. But I'd be interested if anyone on the list has any answers. That would be great.
Okay, we have some more.
And I should mention, I'm sorry for interrupting, but
okay.
I'm afraid I'm going to forget it. One of the things I've been doing fairly recently is I have a search for plain language jobs on usajobs.gov. In case you're wondering why so many jobs get posted on the community, it's because I put them there. But I also keep track of what ones say writer editor and whether or not they say plain language. And sometimes, and this is a ridiculous function of the search feature, they say that if the word has, if the job description has the word explain, then that counts as a plain language hit, which it should not. So I'm seeing a lot of jobs that have the words plain language in them. Great, fantastic, can't encourage that enough. But I also see a number of writer-editor jobs that do not. So that's just sort of a state of the business thing right now. What was the next question?
Did you rewrite the pages yourselves, or did you ask the content owners to do it?
Oh, we did that. We thought that the odds of their wanting to do extra work was really, really slim. And we weren't, despite having hosted a lot of plain language training, we weren't entirely sure that they'd be able to do that. Now, they might have been, but they weren't looking for what we were looking. I mean, they're often looking for, is this accurate? Does this describe accurately? They're not necessarily looking at, can we substitute another word? Can we make this a modifying phrase? Can we put this into a couple of paragraphs? Can we make this a bulleted list? Can we add some headers? You know, they are not necessarily thinking about that. I'd like them to, but as they've pointed out gently in a couple of times, that's not actually in their job description.
Okay. Did you mention putting the site improv data into Google Analytics? Could you please elaborate?
It's not so much putting the site improve data in Google Analytics, but we put the spreadsheet in our Google Drive, and then we put the pages to rewrite also in that Google Drive, and we used suggested edits for people to look at it. Now, what we would do, for example, the whole thing about Google Analytics, or at least what I'm going to use it for in conjunction with Site Improve, is I've been asked to do another project like this. And so I have to weigh, you know, what is a high enough analytics, rich result group of pages that get enough Google Analytics to make a rewrite worthwhile without it being so large that, it just, becomes too big a project for one person to manage. So what I'm going to do is look at what's already loaded in Site Improve. As I said, you have to do some things. You have to load certain, like a set of pages, a subdirectory of pages, and you have to make sure that that's current, which I had not realized. I thought it would magically happen, and I don't think it does. So I'd look at what's already loaded, and then I'd look at like a year's worth of GSA.gov Google Analytics and say, okay, this set is already loaded and it shows up in the top 20. I mean, that's just one possibility. One thing I've been thinking about, I think everyone knows, is that the top pages on GSA.gov are the per diem, the travel and per diem pages, because everybody uses that. That's over 50% of all the traffic to GSA.gov. So that might be worth at least running something to say, does this work out? Do we have any outliers? Do we have consistency with all of these pages? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But there'd be no point in doing like the about pages of 2 offices that closed last year. I mean, they shouldn't be on the site at all.
Our next question is, that plain language is so much more than long sentences and long words, and that readability formulas are unreliable. Did you take the opportunity to apply more plain language guidelines when you were editing these pages?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was the as I said, adding headers, even adding a table or two where it would work, breaking up long paragraphs, everything that could possibly be done. I did find a lot of passive voice, which again surprised me, but they must have snuck in while I was on vacation. But, that prepositional phrases, there's one team, I can't remember who right offhand, but very given to prepositional phrases, which you can switch around to just be like something apostrophe, apostrophe S and show ownership, and you can do away with that. So yeah, I didn't just look at long sentences and long words. I looked at everything. They got the full treatment, which is why I'd like this next one to be another small project, simply because it takes a great deal of time.
We have about 5 to 6 more questions. Do you want to keep going?
Yes, please.
Okay. How do you make plain language urgent to leaders and decision makers who control resources?
Well, I've got a variety of techniques that I think go with what that person is and what they're focused on. Like if they're really focused, and this has happened, I'm sure, to everybody, if they come and say, this really needs to go up right now, I'll look at it. And if there's, something easy and quick, it's, if I put in 2 headers, if I move this around, it'll take 2 seconds, it can go up, and it'll be so much better and easier for the audience than just this. So, it depends on what they are. I mean, who they are and what their, I hate the word drivers, but I can't think of another one. What is motivating them? For example, if they pride themselves on customer service, I say, this will help us provide better customer service and get people what they want faster. And that will often do it. And sometimes it's, I have before now said, if I don't do this, this page will just get rejected and I'll be told to do this. So, why don't we do it right here? And that has worked. And then sometimes there's, what do you want people to do with this page? And, they look at me as if I have lobsters coming out of my ears, and they say, well, we want people to, buy our services or subscribe or, whatever it is. And I say, but nowhere do you actually say this. This is all about the office and the team, and it has nothing to do with buy. And, sometimes it's just a factor of, I don't know what, but, putting the words on the page and thinking, well, we've got a certain amount of words on the page, and, it shows what we do. And then, it takes someone from outside the team to say, I really have no idea of what you're supposed to be doing. What this will do, the benefits, even how to order. And that was, a number of years ago, we created a template for each acquisition page in my division where we said, all right, every time we lead with how to order, and then we, what it is, how to order, features, benefits, but we get that how to order right up there. So, part of that is long-term relationship building and being responsive to their requests. So you can go back and say, we just need to flip some of this information or break it open or do something, because, otherwise it's just a big wall of words and people can't get through that.
Is my 2-point site improve a free tool?
I don't believe so. I think that we have that GSA, or even maybe just an division of GSA, subscribes to it or pays for it or whatever it is. And I'm sorry, I don't know that. when I was first creating this project, it was like it used to be link checker, and then they said, oh, use site improve instead, and we were like, okay, because sometimes things come in, things go out, we change from Zoom to something else, go to webinar, and then something else, so I'm sorry, I don't know.
No worries. Did you see better results in your search engine optimization scores after improving the plain language readability of your pages?
That I do not know. That is an excellent follow-up. I will check on that.
Perfect.
As I said, we have some difficulty getting search term results from Google Analytics for just our pages. And, we've had to go down down to number 200 to see anything that might be related to our pages. So, it keeps us humble with that. But I'd like to look at that more. Thank you for the reminder.
How does Google readability analysis differ from using Microsoft Word, for instance?
This wasn't so much the Google readability as the site improve. The only advantage that I could see was literally site improve gave us a spreadsheet. And that's the only advantage it made. I mean, because you could certainly do the same thing, although I would start with a small set and do the reading level for each page using Word. I have done that in the past, just as a test to see, where are we with this. But you'd have to do so much more by hand, just to calculate that. I mean, you'd have to like create your own spreadsheet of all things. Site improve just saved time. There's no reason you couldn't create your own with an Excel spreadsheet and using the Word. I think that the Word, I'm not thinking of the word right now, but the calculations for whether they use Flesch Kincaid or Gunning Fog, I forget which they do, but Word will show you that. It just might not give you the breakdown, like the number of sentences and the number of, you can't see that I'm doing air quotes, but questionable words or marking words. You could certainly do this by hand. For all I know, WordPerfect does it.
Christina said, Site Improve is a subscription service. It is not cheap, but it is worth it.
Yeah. As I said, we were first using it for checking links. And it wasn't until we got a new person on the team that we realized that it did readability, which is a lesson to all of us to, if you get a new software, noodle around and see if it does anything else. I think that it might also show some dashboards, which we might want to look into. Just writing a note to myself to double check.
We had a question if you plan on sharing the PowerPoint.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'll share it and it'll go on with the video.
What Karen Shriver articles would you recommend?
All of them. She knows so much. I think the one I read was well, shoot, I don't want to get out of this, but it's what do content designers need to know about information design. I think that was it, something like that. But it really had a lot of rich information. But frankly, reading her stuff, your time is never wasted reading any of her material on that. And that's something that, gosh, I wish we had more of in government, research on how people use sites. I just don't know necessarily how to go about that to see. I mean, some of it we're extrapolating, how do people use the web in general to how they use government sites, and we have found people, like when I say people are not going to read, you know, a 6-page website that should be a paragraph, they want to scan and you're not giving them any keywords or headers or guidance. And they're like, well, people will read our stuff. And we're like, no, they won't. You know, I mean, it's helpful to be able to say, here's how people behave on the web. Here's how we think people's experience with your page will be improved.
Speaking of government sites, someone said government sites are notorious for using acronyms and other government-specific jargon. How did you make those more readable without becoming boring?
Some of it was just like using pronouns, or using, or you know, or saying it, or the office, or our office, or whatever. And we've tried to focus on what people wanted to know about. I'm thinking very generally, like the thing they wanted to know about. This is one of the hardest things to do with government content, is people want to know about the thing, the service, the solution, the program. They do not want to know about the office. And people get really hung up on that. When I worked at another agency, we had like 2 million page views a month. And all of that was directed at what we considered program content. Like, you know, what are people doing with our tax dollars? But the content updates that we got were all for the stuff in the about section, like our director gave a new speech, or here's a new photo, or, you know, we have, you know, a promotion that we'd like to highlight. And we're like, you know, nobody's going to those pages. Nobody is going to the about page to read your person's testimony or whatever. Maybe, but I mean, they weren't looking at it. It wasn't getting quite as much information as, say, immigration, border protection. I mean, people were going there, but we were not necessarily, it was much harder to get content updates for that.
So we have a two-parter question. First, do you have any recommendations for other readability audit tools? I'm planning to use Grammarly, the premium version, but for conducting a readability audit on a federal website.
I do not know any other tools. I have not used Grammarly myself. I know that some people seem to like it just fine. I think someone else also mentioned Hemingway. And then maybe that was in another webinar today. Some people like Hemingway. I mean, I just can't speak to the other tools. I'm tool agnostic. The only advantage that SiteImprove has offered was speed.
Okay.
And the analytics.
Yeah, they were asking if you had any specific thoughts, so.
I'm sorry, I have only unspecific thoughts
No,
about that.
no problem. What resources, classes, certificate programs would you recommend to those of us who have not taken any in-depth training?
Oh, gosh. Well, Plain offers a lot of training. So you should see if your agency has a plain language program and if they're offering any training. There's a lot on plainlanguage.gov. And we are looking to do more, you know, before and after showing to get people a little more focused. I'm going to turn that question back on the team and say, how do you learn best? You know, we've got a basic class that introduces general principles and has some exercises, but personally, I was asking some colleagues, you know, how do you best learn writing, editing, plain language? And a lot of them said, my boss had to edit my stuff for a month, and then I started picking up what I needed to do. And there's nothing like being ruthlessly edited by your boss, you know, to really make some points. That's one of the reasons I use Google suggested edits or track changes so people can see what I'm doing, because I don't like it when people, it's tricky. I mean, you can't just dive in, but it's not magic. I mean, it's, or as I say, it's not the science de rocket in the French phrase. I mean, I think everybody can learn this. I think people feel different levels of comfort and expertise doing it, but I think anybody can do it at any level. And so sometimes it's simply just starting to do it. But I would appreciate hearing back from you, whether during, from the chat, or, just email me, and you can email me through plainlanguage.gov, info@plainlanguage.gov, and tell me how you best learn. Small groups, big groups, webinars, group edits, how do you best learn? What's the longest lasting edits you do?
And can you remind everyone what April's topic will be?
Oh gosh. Pretty sure that the April topic is the intersection of Section 508 and plain language. And I'll be getting that up on the website within a couple of days, I hope. But the intersection of Section 508 and plain language, I think, is a very fruitful avenue for discussion, and I think we can bring a lot. I mean, Section 508 needs to know about the language, and we need to know about things like alt text and descriptive link language and the other elements that go into that. So expecting a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, and I also think that will also be an all virtual meeting as of now.
Maybe we should just imagine that everything's going to be virtual or remote until told differently.
Yeah, that's probably a good assumption. We have one more question. GSA used to have a usability testing group first Monday where agencies could get a usability test of their site. Is there any possibility that first Monday will be revived?
I used to work with them. That was so exciting. Such an interesting project. I don't know. I think that we would probably need to check with the UX community of practice, but I don't mind asking and seeing if they would be open to that. Because yeah, First Fridays was really a good project. And one of the things that I remember from that is I was even then more concerned with plain language, but it seemed that there were 3 major content problems, always in the top 10 and often in the top 5, but just too much text, too much content, too many words. I mean, just it was overwhelming, and people said, there's this way too much information here. So too much content, too many acronyms, and too much jargon. So right there is some major plain language problems, right there with major usability.
I think we've had some responses about the best training. A lot of people said virtual training are the best way they learn, and then practice. But yeah, it looks like online classes are a hit.
Well, they're a lot easier to attend. I mean, just thinking, it's a lot easier to say, hey, I'm out for an hour versus I'm out for 3 hours and lunch. I mean, just that makes perfect sense. Thanks for that information.
So that's the end of our questions. Do you have anything else? Well, I'll go ahead and put the evaluation form in the chat if anyone could go ahead and fill it out. But anything else from you, Katherine?
I can't think of anything. We're hoping to have some very exciting programs. I think we've got them scheduled through July. However, my brain has shut down and I can't remember any of them except next month's, which is often how it goes. But if you have ideas for topics or speakers, we'd certainly like to hear them. And if you're doing a content audit yourself, I'd like to see what you're finding. What are you finding? What are you fixing?
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.